Today on CityCast Denver, in the beginning, God created the Garden of Eden right here in Colorado. Then he raised property taxes, displaced Adam and Eve, and it feels like we've been fighting about those dang property taxes ever since. Governor Polis just called a special legislative session minutes after we recorded this episode to put an end to the tax debate. So we've got a true insider with us to break down all the intrigue. Plus, is the minimum wage killing Denver's favorite restaurants? And our wins and fails of the week. Today is Friday, August 16th. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. Welcome back to CityCast Denver, the show about the city that was delighted to welcome the least weird candidate running for vice president this week out of two. Least weird of two.
I love that the Dems have embraced the word weird because it is very much your interpretation. Because I would describe myself and my friends as weirdos, but if you're being weird or acting weird, that's not good.
Yeah, it's so perfect.
It is perfect.
But yes, of course, I'm talking about Tim Waltz, who was in town. He was at some rich dude's house on Wednesday.
Just a little rich dude named Tim Gill.
I mean,
I
didn't know who Tim Gill was. If you knew Tim Gill, Bree did. Let us know. Tim Gill, apparently a very influential dude.
Very.
Huge money from the LGBTQ community side of Denver.
Here's
sure.
one other factoid from this whole Waltz visit that I thought was interesting was tickets for the fundraiser or donors who gave at least $50,000 got an opportunity to do a photo op. So $50,000 is the price for a photo with Tim.
Whoa.
JD Vance on the Republican side, a price for a photo with JD this week in San Antonio, $15,000.
JD Vance will pay you $15,000 if you'll take a photograph with him.
Please help me. I'm running for vice president.
And I don't know why.
All right, it's Friday. It's 5280 Magazine Studios. Here we are. That's the room we're in. But that doesn't matter to you. You're listening wherever you are.
We sound the same regardless of what weird room we're in.
Which we don't get enough credit for. That's due to the technical wizardry of our producer, Olivia Jewel Love.
Truly.
And
it
myself.
Always sounds like we're in my laundry room, whether we're here or not.
But anyway, we're here at downtown. Bree Davies is here, our host. Hey, Bree.
Hi.
And we have a great guest today. You've heard his voice a little bit. He's a progressive political operative, one of the most entertaining local politics watchers on X/Twitter. I don't know where he falls on that question these days. Deep Singh Badesha is here. Welcome to the show, Deep.
Happy to be here. I lean into the Twitter, but if you ever mention Twitter on the website, I think they like kind of decrease traffic to your tweets.
Really?
So you can't say tweet or Twitter because they just probably block it a little bit.
That does sound like something Elon would do.
I was paying attention to this recently because I listen to a lot of tech podcasts about the business of tech, and all of podcasts also refuse to call it X. The hard fork guys will not call it X.
Yeah, I've noticed that about them too. I think it's weird. It was
just the worst rebranding in history, and it's the one middle finger you can give to Elon Musk while using his platform.
I feel like using the name he chose is the punishment he deserves. It's such a corny name for a social media platform. Yeah,
it's horrible.
Terrible brand. Anyway, Deep, did you see Tim Waltz this week?
I did not. Actually, I got a link. They're like, hey, you can come to this event. And I clicked the link and there's $1,000 a ticket. I'm like, can't do that.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, that's a big,
big
price
And then
tag.
I try to sneak in. I'm like, hey, does anyone have an extra ticket? They're like, this is not going to be that event. You could do that.
Could you sneak in if you were press? Was that
I think press was allowed.
Okay.
Yeah. I think actually Kyle Clark did a little segment how they try to ask some questions and
they weren't having it, but you could be there.
They could be there.
I do agree with Kyle on that. I think it's time for Kamala and Tim to start doing proper interviews.
Yeah.
These rallies and speeches and stuff that.
But I see why they didn't want Kyle asking questions because he asks good questions that make people really mad, that are rooted in truth and are just genuine. He's the just asking questions.
He's a fantastic journalist.
Incredible interviewer.
And the mindset is what question does this person not want to be asked that he asks?
Exactly, which is what we all want to know.
Yeah. All right. We have a little bit of business before we get into our top story. It is not too late to win a pair of VIP tickets to the Q Barbecue Fest at Civic Center Park next weekend. We're giving away a pair, and all you need to do is help us celebrate our 900th episode this week by submitting a story about how CityCast Denver or our newsletter Hey Denver have connected you with the city, have made you feel like you are a Denverite. Only members are eligible, so this is the perfect time to become a member and support what we do. Join now, submit a story either via a voicemail or a text to 720-500-5418 or an email to denver@citycast.fm. Any kind of story will do. We've had some nice ones come in already since we put out the call yesterday, and I just think it's been really sweet hearing about the impact we've had.
We love to hear from you. So.
All right, let's get into this top story. This has been such an interesting one. Somehow, the biggest political issue in Colorado for like 2 years now is property taxes, not abortion, there seems like there's more important things to talk about, but we're talking about property taxes for 2 years running. And our governor and state legislators appear poised any second now to call a second special session.
Like this could happen while we're recording.
It could happen
right?
as we speak. On exactly this issue of property taxes and what to do about them going up. So Deep, you've been close to this. You've been near all the people who are doing all these negotiations. That's why we wanted to talk to you. What's happening right now?
Yeah, I was just refreshing my Twitter to see if
it had happened.
I was curious if the governor was going to come out and break another glass.
Oh my God! Last fall, I forgot he did that. In case of Prop HH failing, break glass.
Oh,
Polis, one of your best moves.
But I don't know what he would put on the label now. In case of angry billionaires, please break glass. In case of fiscal Armageddon pending.
Oh boy. So what do you mean angry billionaires? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So it's no surprise that in Colorado we've become a pretty democratic state. I've been active in politics when we were more of a purple state. I remember the energy that in 2008 that Barack Obama brought in, but we still took some. The state capitol was always divided, whether it was the House or the Senate. Cory Gardner won here. So
I think that was the last big GOP victory, was Cory Gardner for Senate.
Yes. If you can ask, I think Heidi Ganahl also won a statewide seat after that, but then she lost pretty terribly for governor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. They haven't been doing well since.
Yeah, correct. I worked on Udall's campaign, so that was tough in 2014.
Fun time.
Yeah. But basically what's happened is at the State House now we have a supermajority at the House and we have a near supermajority in the Senate, right? And we're probably going to grow those Democratic majorities again in November. So you've seen what sometimes what Democrats are doing in red states, what Republicans are doing here is going to the ballot. Right. And I'm going to ask you all a question. If you live in Denver, how many ballot questions do you think they're going to be on your ballot?
This is actually
a great question.
Yeah. And this was actually a question I was going to have for you in this conversation was like, this has been talked about as one of the longest ballots. And I know from just doing sort of social voter engagement with friends and people often asking me to help them parse the ballot, the longer it is, the harder it is to get people to engage with that ballot. And I feel like that is one worry, I would assume, of taking something to the voters.
Yeah, so like the whole theme, if you zoom out here, is there's going to be 26 ballot questions.
Lord.
So about 16 statewide and about 10 for Denver. So there's going to be 26. It's going to be very long. You'll vote for like 5 people, and then you'll vote for 26 ballot questions. Which is kind of crazy too, because we have an 85% voter turnout. So, a lot of people are going to
that's why they're putting these questions on this ballot, right? Because this is the ballot, the presidential year. This is the one people are going to turn out for.
Yeah, correct.
Well, maybe in some cases you wouldn't. Anyway, that's in the weeds a little bit. Go on.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into the weeds. But essentially what's happened is conservatives, especially 2 groups, Advanced Colorado, run by Michael Fields and billionaire oligarchs behind him, and Colorado Concern, that's literally a group of CEOs, like a lobbyist group for CEOs. They're behind a lot of initiatives on the ballot. In particular, 2 of them, Initiative 50 and Initiative 108. Initiative 50 is a constitutional amendment, so it needs 55% to pass. And 108, it's just a statutory change, but it's for taxes. So if you have to change it, you'll have to go back to the voters for it because of Tabor. 50 would essentially cap property taxes increases at 4%, revenue statewide. And then 108 would cut property taxes. So 50 limits how much we can grow in the future and severely limits how much we can grow in the future. And 108 cuts taxes about $3 billion, right? The Bell Policy Center's estimated anywhere from $2 to $4 billion in the mid $3 billion, right? And a lot of people have been calling this fiscal Armageddon if it happens, right? And this property tax debate, as you know, has been going on for a while. It started with like Prop 120. And we all knew this was coming after the Gallagher Amendment. And are you familiar with the Gallagher Amendment?
Yeah, that was like an amendment to Tabor, right? And again, this is maybe too much detail, but the Gallagher Amendment was something that like kept property taxes somewhat stable. And now that we don't have it anymore, they've moved around a lot with the fluctuating economy from the pandemic, and that's what's got a lot of people upset.
Correct. Gallagher essentially made it so it was a 45-55 split between residential and non-residential. And once Gallagher was gone, everyone knew that the property taxes were going to start fluctuating. We didn't know that the pandemic was going to happen and that Colorado was going to be the hottest place to move ever. And everyone wanted to move here. So this is sort of tied to the housing market as well.
Sure.
Right? So again, we have these two things. Armageddon's coming for us, right? These are on the ballot. People want this to pass. It's going to save hundreds of millions, billions of dollars for the bottom line for billionaires.
So these are, you're talking about the conservative-backed ballot measures.
Yes, 50 and 108 in particular.
And it seems like, well, the politics of this is like Coloradans would probably vote for tax reductions, right? Is that the idea, or what's the conversation around these been?
So that's the interesting, right? There's a debate is like, if these go to the ballot, do they pass or do they not pass, right? Several weeks ago when Biden was the top of the ticket, a lot of Democrats, a lot of progressives were pretty worried that like, hey, these things might, we might not have enough turnout to beat these, right? And I think voters in Colorado are very smart. I think if you go up to them and like, hey, this will defund schools. This is going to defund firefighters. And we have a lot of fires. This is going to defund security. This is going to defund housing, right? I think a lot of people would have voted it down. So several weeks ago, I think Democrats were like, can we beat this? How is this going to look? And then the Kamala switch happens, which is huge enthusiasm, right? We're going to have a huge turnout because a lot of people want to vote for her at this point in Colorado, the folks I'm talking to. I think that scared the conservative side. They're like, oh, wow, we're about to spend all this money. And if we lose 50 into 108, that's going to look pretty bad for our donors. It's going to look pretty bad for our political operation. So now you have high risk on both sides, right? Democrats and progressives are like, wow, high risk if this passes, fiscal Armageddon. Republicans and conservatives are like, wow, high risk. If this doesn't pass, we're out of a job. We look really bad. We're going to probably lose the last couple things. In high risk on both sides, looks like it's time for a deal.
Right. So just because both sides you're saying are seeing a lot of uncertainty around this.
Correct.
Okay.
And then it's interesting, though, is you probably did you see this letter that went out from like 40 plus organizations?
I did. I wanted to read the list of how many people. So the Colorado Sun said this letter was on Monday. It was like, I think an open letter, or maybe it was a letter to Polis calling for a special session, but it was so many people calling for this session. It was social justice groups, business interests, the state's hospital associations, schools, teachers unions, liberal foundation. Actually, now we're talking about schools. It might be time for a disclosure, Deep. You do work for DPS.
Yes, I work for Denver Public Schools. However, I'm here in my own personal capacity.
Right. Okay. So let me continue with the list now. Liberal foundations, conservative foundations, the mayors of Denver, Aurora, and Colorado Springs, all three quarterbacks competing for to start for the Broncos this season. Just kidding. And they all signed on to this letter to Polis calling for a special session. Why is it so like? Why does everybody want this now?
It's interesting. It's like there is a party and there's a large sector of Colorado that wants to be properly governed, right? There's complex problems around housing, complex problems around food security, transportation, a growing infrastructure need, right? There's a responsible party, and there's a party that wants to burn things down. So he's like, how do you negotiate with arsonists? And should you ask yourself, why do the arsonists want to start so many fires? I guess you can have that question. One of the questions we should probably ask is, why do these arsonists have so much gasoline? But that's essentially what's happened, right? Is these arsonists are like, we're going to burn down the state unless you come negotiate with us. And I've heard them be compared to even people who strapped bombs to themselves walked into a room. And like, how do you negotiate with these people? But you're like, okay, we'll let you burn only the top floor of our house or just the backyard, and we'll hope it doesn't catch to anything, right? Because you have to be responsible. And a lot of these higher education institutions, a lot of this like civil society, progressive organizations, business interests, even the bond market folks, like these would wreak havoc onto our economy. And if we can strike a deal, let's try to strike a deal. The people who are most upset by this, though, I think are folks who were thinking about running the No campaign or were running the No campaign. We're like, wow, if we could have just got all these folks on board for a no campaign, we probably could have just beat it in the fall.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, if everybody hates this now, like all these people, like, yeah, why not just fight it out?
And that's the question I think that we need to zoom out on, right? And this is the thing we had talked about before the podcast is, again, going back to these 36 ballot questions, right? If you zoom out, a lot of these organizations don't care about just these 2 questions of these 36 or these 26. They care about a lot more, right? So this fall, there's going to be a tax on guns that's going to be up for voting. Removing the same-sex marriage ban is on there. The constitutional amendment to secure the right for abortion is going to be there. A constitutional amendment to codify what currently exists for school choice, that's going to be on there.
So we're talking education, reproductive, healthcare, and justice. We're talking gun issues, LGBTQ, human rights issues. I mean, like literally runs the gamut.
2 more really big criminal justice issues. One's about truth in sentencing that would really change how parole works in the state, probably increasing the number of people who are incarcerated and how long they're incarcerated. Another one that would give more money to police officers and safety in that way. So a lot of people, like if you look at that group, every single one of those groups also has another interest on somewhere else on the ballot. And so do these conservatives, right? That Advanced Colorado is running 2 or 3 other ballot initiatives on top of this one, right? So I think folks are like, okay, this is the 2 highest risk ballot questions, right? 50 and 108. If we can get these off the table, if we can sort of reach a quote unquote deal or a compromise, then we can focus on the rest of this, right? So this is like a small battle in this huge war. Yeah.
A capacity question. I love the political intrigue of all of this. This is so fun to me. But I wonder, Bree, like, do you see any meaning in this for you as like a non-tax nerd?
Well, yeah. Also, I'm just thinking about how many voters are renters, and like, what does the property tax conversation, how does that impact someone renting in Denver?
That's one of the things I've been kind of screaming about on the artist formerly known as Twitter is Colorado actually has the 3rd lowest property taxes in the nation, right? If you think our property taxes are bad, like you should check out other folks, right? The reason why Colorado property taxes feel so bad for a lot of folks is because home values have really skyrocketed, right?
Yeah.
So like say you're someone who actually bought a house like 10, 15 years ago, right?
Sure.
Maybe like yourself. And your house might have doubled in value, meaning your property taxes might have doubled in value, right? Which does feel, and that does hurt quite a bit. So I understand that. But that didn't happen from the tax rate changing. It happened from the property values really increasing right there.
Yeah, I feel like the problem is really just for the people who are like, who own a home and maybe don't have the same income that they used to and can't pay the increase or the absolute value that they now have because the rate's the same, like an old person who's not pulling in a salary anymore.
Or someone that I'm thinking about my neighborhood, Barnum, or like someone in Elyria, Swansea who like bought a house in the most affordable neighborhood, and then and it's cool. My home value doubled, but my income didn't double all of a sudden. So, but I guess I'm just confused by like, do these things get passed down to the renters? Because we're talking about property owners. We're talking about people that own real estate.
Yeah. I will say that it's unfortunate when you see everybody on both sides of the aisle scramble when property tax bills increase about $70, $80 a month. But when the rent goes up $200 a month, they're like, that's tough. That's just market dynamics.
Right.
It's so glaring. It's so glaring. 2 straight years of fighting at fever pitch over property taxes.
And like, are we not thinking about that?
When like record-breaking evictions in Denver this year again for the 2nd year in a row.
I saw someone, their rent went up by like $800, and I was like, what? And this is the reality of having to renew a lease every year, which homeowners do not have to do.
I know what the governor would say. He would talk about density and increasing supply more. So I do think they're having those conversations. It's just like, it's just not the same level of intensity, and it's just clear that it's because of the money.
But can we go back to all these groups that have signed on to this conversation? This is because where the taxes would go, right? I guess that's the other thing I would like to know as a voter is when we increase property taxes or we keep them at this level, what is that paying for? What am I paying for with my property taxes?
So your property taxes, the bulk of it goes to the local governments, right? You think your school districts, think your local municipalities, firefighters, those type of things. But the mechanism of 108 requires backfill to local governments, and whether or not that's going to happen, it's ambiguous. That I know it's not really fun, but there's this property tax commission that you can listen to on some Mondays. So if you really want to,
we'll drop a link in the show notes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, please listen. In that, the chair, Denver Senator Chris Hansen was saying, why is this so ambiguous? And, the nonpartisan staff was like, we're not sure if they did that on purpose, but, they left it ambiguous. So you're the ones, state legislator, that has to determine who's the winners and losers here, right? And unfortunately, what we've seen time and time again is like when you have to do cuts, a lot of those cuts actually go to higher education probably first, because a lot of folks think like maybe higher education can find
it's not
other
as
means.
crucial.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough, and a lot of things were going to be cut. The general fund was going to be cut. A lot of projects that are really important services would be cut, because you would enter like a fiscal strain where you're literally only do the bare minimum that you can.
Which is making me think in education, I'm thinking about environment. I'm thinking about the fact that, I don't know, we have several dozen schools that still don't have air conditioning. Like really basic needs aren't being met. And is that, are schools going to be feeling these things in this way?
So school funding on that stuff
this comes from somewhere else.
Yeah,
okay,
that stuff comes from a little bit else, because school districts raise on local property taxes, but a lot of those things are sometimes covered by a bond.
Okay,
right. So there'll probably be a ballot later. They'll probably vote on it later today. There'll probably be DPS is going to have a bond measure that will guarantee AC in all schools.
Okay.
So
I feel like that would be popular.
That's not directly tied to this.
Okay. No, but that's helpful.
We could keep going on this. There's a million things to talk about, but I think that we do need to move on. But I have one last question for you, Deep, because it does seem inevitable that this special session is going to happen, and I want some help. Like, what am I watching for? What do you think are going to be the important markers of like the important decisions have been made, or like the power has been brokered, or what are you looking for?
It's going to be really interesting, because this is going to be on a time frame, right? So yeah, special session is going to be called for about 3 days. I think they're aiming for the 26th, because a lot of us are going to be in Chicago next week for the DNC.
Sure.
And then folks are going to come back. So you have about 6 or 7 days to actually strike a deal. Folks are going to try to rush it through in 3. And Advance Institute and some progressive organizations, the governor's office and other organizations, they've kind of they've kind of come up with what they call a framework. And this is a proposal that was shared with everybody at that tax commission on Monday. You should look for is how much that changes. How much advocates are willing to change what was the deal that quote unquote called the special session, and how much Democrats and Republicans are able to negotiate with Michael Fields and his donors, his billionaire donors, about that. And it's interesting. You have 120 days usually to tackle Israeli issues, but you're dealing with climate change bills and school bills, and property tax is just one part of those, right? But billionaires have gotten so used to like private jets and like private big estates that they now want their own private special session. So we'll be able to really focus in. It'll be exciting. I'm
so glad that they get this. That's so nice for us to give them this opportunity.
I like to help them out. So any way we can.
We'll think of the poor billionaires.
Wow, so happy for them. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back talk about minimum wage. All right, we're back. Our hot topic this week is a really, really hot one. A lot of people are upset about it. Maybe not as much as property taxes, but certainly some people are. Minimum wage is set to go up here in Denver again in January from $18.29 an hour to $18.81 an hour. And the restaurant industry is in an uproar. They say minimum wage is killing some of our favorite restaurants. That's the big question driving this great article from the Colorado Sun this week, laid out a disturbing trend of restaurateurs leaving town, not wanting to open new places. We've been talking on the show about how expensive it is to go out in Denver lately, how hard it is to find a good value. And this is really all part of the same conversation, I think. And Deep, I know you're a big foodie from your Twitter presence we've been talking about. I want to start with you. How are you feeling about this?
I have been in Cap Hill for about a decade or so. So, I've come to realize that a lot of my favorite places have closed or are probably going to close, but new things will pop up in its place. When Barracuda's closed, that hurt.
A blow. Great nachos.
I had actually posted on my Twitter, I'm like, good night, sweet prince, to Benny Blanco's. And then someone commented like, at least Barracuda's is still there. It's such a great restaurant. I'm like,
you're like, what?
Barracuda's closed 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, bro.
That was quite a while ago.
I mean, you mentioned Benny Blanco's. It's now the time to talk about that, because that's part of this too. That was such a blow this week.
Well, one of the things I really did want to reframe before we dive into Benny Blanco's, which my go-to pizza place for a long time, was, I used to work at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment.
Okay.
As in the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics. So fun. But I was in charge of one of the first local minimum wage reports. So Denver passed a local minimum wage that was different than surrounding areas. And we were tasked with writing a report about how it affected business employment. Back then, we found out that it wasn't really affecting anything. And I took a look now. I still think the minimum wage is on net a very, very, very good thing. And I don't think that's necessarily why these restaurants are closing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I kind of am with you on that. But also, this is just my feelings coming out, being like, I'm sorry, the people I'm not going to blame are the minimum wage workers.
No.
The people with the least amount of power in this situation, who are the people that are the renters that are trying to survive in this city. I can't imagine trying to survive on $18 an hour. I just can't.
No, I mean, the way the rents are going up,
It's insane.
people are leaving all the time because it's unaffordable. But it's part of a bigger picture of the economy, you know, like if the minimum wage goes up, the minimum wage worker gets more money, but then the prices all go up, you know, it's part of the inflation conversation too.
Yeah. It's
But
complicated.
to speak to the restaurateurs side of this, like what they say is that it is too hard to make money running a restaurant in Denver. Denver's not hospitable. The names from this Colorado Sun article: Troy Gard of Garden Grace, Tag Burger Bar, Los Chingones, he's moving to Houston because he's done with Denver. Alex Seidel of Mercantile and Chook Chicken, that great chicken chain, he took up pottery. He's not working on his restaurants so much anymore. Juan Padro of Fox and the Hen, Mr. Oso, Bardo, Tappenberger, many more from the Culinary Creative Group. He's opening restaurants in New Orleans now because he says he loves Denver, but, quote, it's just not feasible.
I'm just dying. I'm dying. You know, the last thing you should do in Denver is tell people why you don't want to be here and why you want to leave. Because guess what? We'll tell you then, don't let the door hit you, baby. Get out of here. Like, it's so offensive to me to be like, well, I'm just going to pull up stakes and go somewhere else. A lot of people can't do that. That's not an option for a lot of people. I'm not discounting the fact that restaurants are struggling or that these restaurateurs are having trouble, but like, this is just like, it's just from so high up. I'm hearing these complaints. Like, and even in the article, the Garden Grace and I think Juan Padro, maybe it was Tommy Lee. One of them we're talking about the high dollar. Their high dollar customers are doing fine. They're still coming in for these chef's tables things. And I was just like, you are not making me feel sympathy for you because you're talking about catering to this higher end clientele and they're doing fine, but the rest of you aren't showing up for us. So we're out of here. And I was just like, yikes, just hurt. Frankly.
Yeah, it was not a good look from some of these restaurateurs this week. There was one quote, well, actually, our a friend of the show, John Imbergamo, who has been a longtime restaurant insider, he represents Jen Jasinski and Beth Gruich of Stoic and Genuine.
And I have to say, their comments I didn't find that came off this way. I don't think
I talked to
Jen and Beth they didn't come
week.
off that way to me at all.
Not at all. Not like blaming the city, not blaming regulations.
They also feel like they care about being here.
Anyway, so John Imbergamo sent me a screenshot from his Facebook page where he posted this Colorado Sun article, and Alex Seidel commented on it. This is the restaurateur who runs Mercantile and Chook, like I mentioned. He calls out Robin Kniech by name.
Oh, wow.
Our former city council member who was on our show on Monday talking about
recently on the
affordable
show.
housing.
Big fan. Go, Robin.
Alex says, I also had a meeting with Robin Kniech several years ago when she proposed her restaurant and business killing ideas. Now, I think he's talking about the minimum wage going up, that bill. And he says, her bullish attitude started as soon as I walked in her office. Before I could say, how are you? In my mind, she will go down as the one person that started and continues fighting the fight to ruin the culinary fabric and culture of this city that took many talented people 15 to 20 years to build.
Wow, that is harsh. And you know,
I mean, he's
we just literally talked about this about like renters, like no one cares when the rents go up, but property taxes, oh wow. It's almost the reverse here, right? Where people are like, I gotta pay these people $2 more an hour versus my lease, my corporate lease, they already own this building outright. They want to increase my rent by 1,000%, 50%. Like,
the cost of doing business is not the minimum wage worker's fault.
Correct. Well, it's part of it though. We have to give them a little bit of credit, and I'm a person that loves going out to eat. I think a lot of people do. Yeah. It's a nice experience, go to a great restaurant. If you feel like you're getting a good value, it's a great thing. And the minimum wage going up 50 cents an hour could be like hundreds of thousands of dollars against their bottom line. That could be, along with a number of the other changes that have been made, worker protections are just a part of it, but the inflation, the pandemic, rising cost of goods, that's another part of it. That all those things together do add up to the difference between being able to stay open and running a restaurant and having to close it. Like Benny Blanco's,
I want to talk about Benny. I want to talk about Benny Blanco's in a minute, but
and that's another whole. They got their own little twist on this.
Yeah, they had a comment that I did not like,
but it's an aggregate for the business owner.
It's totally fair. It is part of the issue here, which is the cost burden on the owner of the restaurant. I totally get that. It's just interesting to me because that part of it tends to dominate this conversation in a way that doesn't highlight, like you're saying, Deep, the real estate part of this, the other costs that are not associated with that. And I think Tamara Chang in Colorado Sun did a great job in this article of just laying out all of it. And it does feel like a perfect storm of a lot of problems that become the burden of the restaurant owner. So I don't want to say I'm not sympathetic to that, but I hear you. I get frustrated when it feels like it falls on people that just don't have the power. They're just trying to pay their rent.
In a little bit, this feels like a little bit of growing pains, right? I feel like...
Yeah, that's true.
10, 15 years ago, Denver was a much different place than it is now, right? And then the pandemic accelerated things and made things a disaster in many ways. And I feel like we're kind of getting out of that hump right now, right? In a model that maybe worked 15 years ago might not work now, right? You have to be innovative. You have to be different. And I will say this, as, is like Justine Sandoval is your green chili correspondent. If I come back on, I can become your curry correspondent.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
I have
calling your shot. Love it.
I've grown up in Colorado for a long time, and there's not been that much good Indian food. But finally, there is, and it's Indian food that's open till 3 a.m.
Oh, Masala Burger?
Yeah, Masala Burger's open until 3 a.m. Ticket Grill 2 in Cap Hills open until 3 a.m. Little India's open all the time.
Which is absolutely an outgrowth of Denver's boom.
Yeah, so if you look at like the amount of ethnic and diverse restaurants in Denver, those have, I think, skyrocketed in a way that those didn't exist 10 years ago.
It's
so like,
no, that's fair. You could go to Little India. And that was about
That was it. And they really cornered the market. And they still kind of corner a special market. I mean,
they have a great product.
Shout out to the homies. They're like my wife's family's friends.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
So, yeah.
Still a small town in some ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I emailed Robin Kniech, since we just had her on the show.
Yeah.
I sent her that screenshot of Alex Seidel's comments. I had reached out to him to talk to him this week. He was on vacation. I'm hoping to talk to him soon as well. But anyway, Robin responded to the screenshot. She said she's working on a longer piece for her blog that we'll share at some point about minimum wage. But she made a few observations I think are worth sharing. One is that there are 4% more food and beverage businesses today than there were in 2019. So this narrative about restaurants closing is maybe does not conform with the broader story.
And John Embergamo said something similar. That he said, I watch Westward's openings and closings every week because they really keep a catalog of it. And he says more restaurants tend to be opening.
Yeah, I mean,
so there is still
there's
growth.
Churn. That's part of the restaurant industry. It's just that not all of them survive because not all of them find an audience, and there's churn. That it's part of it. Robin also says we've recovered all the jobs we lost during COVID, and we have lower unemployment than the state of Colorado on average, even though we have a higher minimum wage. So I think those are interesting points.
Yeah, and I feel like when you go to really good food cities in America, the best food cities are where like people can work in the food industry as either a server or as a cook, front of the house, back of the house, any of that for like multiple for like decades.
Yeah,
right.
It can be a career.
It has to be a career. We can't be like a world class. We'll probably never be a world-class food city, but we can't be like a great American food city if we don't
cultivate the career.
Cultivate this career of it, right? Which needs higher wages.
And I would just say, Jen and Beth talked about that with Stoic and Genuine. Was they were sad to close it because their ultimate plan was to grow it and pass it on to their employees who are doing exactly what you're saying, Deep, which is making a career out of it. And I think that's worth a whole bigger conversation about the kinds of industries that have lost the career angle. I feel this very strongly about retail, these expertises that aren't treated as an expertise. And it is unfortunate because I would love to see that. In my city, that's a great story. And that's what we want, is we want a great story for our city. And this is not looking so great. Also, can I just be pissed about Benny Blanco's for a minute?
Yes, we have to talk about it.
First of all, love that plate. I have such distinct memories of coming out of that sweat box that was the Snake Pit on Shebop or Shag Night, like 2 a.m. So like, it's just, I'm 21 years old. It's 2001. You walk half, 30 steps and you're in Benny Blanco's. And it's just like, the memories are so beautiful. I love that place. But there was this quote in the Denver Post article from the owner, Holly Martinez, who said one of the biggest reasons for the closures was because we, quote, don't feel comfortable in the area anymore due to homeless and the decline of the neighborhood. Homegirl, you guys opened this in 2000. Do you know what that corner looked like? It looked way worse than it does today. Call Your Mother was not there. Jelly was not there. It has turned around. And I'm not discounting that there may be some struggles, but like, I do remember when it was pretty rough over there. I kind of just found that to be a little bit of a cop-out. Maybe there's other factors at play here, but that frustrated me because I think it mischaracterizes Capitol Hill a little bit. I don't know, Deep, you may be better to speak on this because you live in the neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I think Cap Hill is probably the best neighborhood in all of Denver, maybe all of Colorado. Me and my wife just bought a house in Cap Hill, so we're there for the long haul.
Congratulations.
Thank you, appreciate it. But no, I think the neighborhood's better than it's ever been. And, it's sad. Again, I think there's going to be a natural churn to these things. Racine's closed, which was sad. Gov's Park Tavern turned over. Tom's Diner. I mean, these are all these places that would but they all kind of close for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
And the new things pop up in its place, right? Where Barracuda's was is now going to be a local Indian place, right? And next to that is Wakano Grill, which is a great Asian place.
Oh, and it's been there forever too.
Right.
Give them some business.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're thriving though. They're always so busy.
So what they're doing, the owners of this place, is they just opened a new Benny Blanco's in Arvada.
Which I'm going to have to go to now.
I went there a month ago, totally different vibe. But they moved up to the north suburbs, and it kind of connected with this other quote from Alex Seidel in the Colorado Sun article where he said, I personally have never worked in a restaurant in my entire 36-year career when it's slower on a Friday and Saturday night than it is the rest of the week. What that tells me is that there's nobody coming down from the suburbs. The people that go out on Friday, Saturday night are no longer coming downtown.
That's interesting.
I think it's this
That's part of
downtown
that
conversation too.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's the owners of Benny Blanco saying they don't feel safe. Like some people, that's just a fact right now.
For sure. I think we do need to transform our downtown. It's crazy. It's like, I just had a friend visiting from Australia. First time in the US, so he was visiting all the big cities.
Cool.
So he did like LA, SF, Chicago, New York. He's like, oh, we have friends in Denver. I'm like, I just want to let you know it's going to be a little bit different. But he was like, it was so lively because we were hanging out in Cap Hill and he was here like Monday through Friday. We were hanging out at Cap Hill. We went to Rhino and stuff. He's like, oh, let's go downtown. I was like, it's going to be a little bit different than you expect. So we did, but it was like an absolute ghost town.
Kind of a letdown, yeah.
There's a huge pocket of activity always on the north side, right? Especially in like that high-low neighborhood. If you go there for brunch, it's packed. Right,
Man ice cream.
Rhino is always packed. I think Cap Hill always has a lot of activity. South Broadway has a lot of activity, but like, downtown really needs to find like its next chapter.
And it needs to find its identity too. I think it doesn't have a feeling or that something you go there for that atmosphere, the experience. I'm thinking South Broadway. It has an atmosphere. It's why you go there. Downtown is missing that for sure. And I bet a lot of that is the restaurants just aren't what people want, or the narrative about it, the downtown narrative that we're constantly trying to figure out is if it's real or not.
It'd be interesting to look at like how that Plaque Park community and like South Pearl and stuff have done, because I feel like Sushi Den opens up a a restaurant every
and that's
every
also
year.
that's also a beautiful block. I love going to that part of town. That's so interesting.
All right. Well, this is also another big topic we're going to keep talking about. I mean, the minimum wage is going up in January. I'm sure we're going to talk about service fees more at some point. That was another interesting part of this article.
We'll just be having pizza later for lunch from Benny Blanco's.
The only thing I was going to end on though is, it sounds like a lot of business is starting in Denver and then they're moving out to the suburbs. And I just want to say you're welcome to the suburbs. That like no longer you have to eat Domino's, you can now eat Benny Blanco's.
Or like Cherry Cricket, Broomfield, Littleton, they're figuring it out.
What a success story that Cherry Cricket is.
Let's talk about, that's a great model, I think.
So we're helping out the suburbs.
Providing huge value, and that's an expensive place, but it's always great. Anyway, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the state of restaurants? Are you finding value going out to eat right now in Denver these days? Let us know, 720-500-5418. Anything you want to say about restaurants, we want to hear it. 720-500-5418. One more quick break, and then we'll be back with wins and fails. All right, we're back. It's the best way to end the week. Wins and fails, aka our Rocky Mountain highs and lows. Each of us brought a recent local something we think is a win for Denver and another we think is a fail for Denver, and we're going to talk about them. And we are going to do fails first. We always do. Bree?
Oh my God. I've been just like raging about this since Nate Miner wrote this piece.
Yes, I know what you're going to talk about. I feel the same way.
CDOT wants to widen Federal Boulevard for a BRT, even though the whole purpose of BRT installing it is to calm traffic, provide a better service for bus riders, to also entice folks to ride the bus and slow traffic down. My brain can't comprehend how CDOT is even thinking like this. Like, I live in this area. There's this conversation about, well, if we make it too hard for cars to drive, they're going to go down your side streets. I live on that side street. Good luck. You can't go anywhere. You can drive like 3 blocks and then you hit it. No, they don't go through. On either side of Federal, those don't go through. So it's not going to happen. I am a side street house owner and I want BRT so bad. I want this to slow down. And I would beg CDOT, the folks at CDOT making these decisions, please sit at the corner of Alameda and Federal from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and watch people try to cross that street. It is terrifying. It's like you're watching a grandma carry a tiny cart moving as fast as she can while people are whipping around her and turning. Like, just please, for the love of God, think twice before we make Federal even worse. Like, This was like going to be the savior. They're doing it on Colfax. If we can do it on Colfax, we can do it on Federal. Please do not widen the street.
So we're talking about bus rapid transit.
Oh my God, I'm so mad. I'm sorry.
This is coming to Colfax this year. Colorado Boulevard is the plan to do that one next. Deep, are you watching this?
Yeah, I mean, transportation, that's one of the things I think is the next chapter in Denver's thing is better transportation is going to make us a much better city. It's hard to get around. I, again, live very fortunately in Cap Hill that is very connected to a lot of things. Me and my wife for the longest time only had one car and we would just either bike places, take scooters. I know how you feel about those. Yes, I think they're a great option. Yeah. I think they're an awesome option over a car for sure. No, I mean, I think it's interesting how like CDOT has a lot of opportunities to do a lot of, the right things, and they just kind of fumble at the finish line.
Their offices sit and look at Federal and 14th, which is, if you want to watch people running for their lives to the bus stop, that is the place. That is the most highway-looking part of Federal. They know. They have to know.
Yeah, this one is just very odd. Because I from everything I'd heard from people who work at CDOT is that there'd been a real change in thinking from the top recently, the last 5-10 years. We did a whole live
panel about it, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, we had the guy who runs the BRT project for CDOT, Ryan Knowles, and I don't know, he seemed to get it. Maybe they're seeing numbers that we're not seeing here, but I'm with you. Like, this seems completely contrary to the entire purpose of BRT.
And if we want to change Denver for the better, we have to have better transit options.
Anyway, we're going to talk more about that as well at some point. Deep, what's your fail this week?
So it's hard to say fail because it's just a sad thing, but I guess that's what a fail is. So the point in time count.
Yes.
Yeah.
They did it that you probably saw this, that overall homelessness is up in Denver Metro. Which is a bummer. That's not what you want to see. A little bit of hope in that article, I guess, says that Denver saw a drop in unsheltered homelessness. Denver also came out with their own report, kind of saying how they've been successful. But that's a debate I already saw brewing on Twitter and Facebook and all that in terms of how people are taking these numbers and where investment is going. But that was a sad number to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is the annual survey of homelessness across the metro area. And I mean, especially after Mayor Johnston made this the number one priority and declared, what was it, a state of emergency or something on his first day in office. And he put all of these resources into it. And to see the number continue to go up, even though not as much as it did last year. And like you said, less unsheltered homelessness. I don't know. We'll see how the narrative develops because that debate is interesting. Like, and it's hard to count these things too. It's like, this is not a reliable.
Hard to count. They said they excluded migrants from it, which was
interesting.
Denver again had their own report, and I think they were like releasing some comments on the point in time count as well, saying that Denver is actually doing better, but it has grown in the whole metro area. But that's the thing, Denver and the whole metro area just needs to build so much more housing.
Yeah.
Like the only way we're gonna get out of this is more housing.
And evictions are up, and this is not counting the fact that we are just one municipality surrounded by a bunch of other ones dealing with the same problem. Like, I also think that, like, I'm not to like give the Johnston administration a ton of credit, but like they did walk into this problem. And to be fair, this was the thing he campaigned on. But I'm curious what this looks like in 2 or 3 years when we've had more time to implement a different approach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's doing what we voted on him to do. True. I mean, it's not anyway. So
one of the 26 ballot initiatives is going to be about affordable housing.
Oh my gosh.
Hope no one had to
so
go to work
this
this fall, because you got to learn about so many ballot initiatives.
And we will be with you that whole time.
That's what we're here for. So my fail, similar to all of the things we've been talking about, taxes, housing, etc. Great article from our friend Joe Rubino at the Denver Post this week about how, we have 2 sales taxes going to the ballot here in Denver this fall, one for Denver Health, one for affordable housing, the mayor's idea. So what Joe did is he looked back at all the other sales taxes that we've approved in the last 10, 15 years, and he found that more than $1 billion has been generated by all these taxes, but the city has not spent all that money.
What?
We continue to collect money for things like healthy food for children,
I wondered about
a city
this.
fund for mitigating climate change, providing college scholarships, but many of those accounts still have balances.
Do they just have no one managing that money? Is that the
I don't know. Well, that's an argument too, because some people are like, well, the people like the beneficiaries are like, there's too many limitations on the spending. We need to have it be wider, and so we can use it for more different types of things to solve the problems you all want. But then, like, City Council member Kevin Flynn was like, no, those limitations were what people voted on. Like, spend the money on what people voted on.
But if we're sitting on $1 billion and we still have these problems that could be addressed by them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting is like, if both sales taxes pass this fall, where our sales tax would be like 9.9% or something. It's going to be close to 10%. It's going to be some of the highest in the entire nation. It's going to be rough. So I think you might, like, not to go back to property taxes, that if a deal is struck on property taxes, right, and there's a pinky promise or an amendment that says, hey, no more property tax ballots for the next 10 years or 20 years, they'll be like, oh, well, maybe we'll go after sales taxes next. Right?
Yeah. That
All right.
could be.
Yeah, I mean, interesting stuff. We got to go on. We're going long here, but my win, I'll start. I got to give it up to Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback from the Denver Broncos. We are now
I love
entering.
that you've gone from being a raging Avalanche fan to now you're really into the Broncos.
Yeah,
Denver's hitting you hard, Paul.
I'm 3 years into my big football fan experiment, and it's going great. I'm totally on the bandwagon. This kid looked great against the Colts last Sunday. I'm watching preseason games, Bree.
You're old Denver, Paul. You've officially made it over to the other side, and now you're. All you need to do is next time you go to King Soopers, wear your Bronco attire on Sunday, and you will pretty much just be somebody from Denver.
I have been thinking about buying some.
Oh yeah,
oh you have to.
Yeah. My wife's against it.
Oh,
Greg my husband just bought an Orange Crush t-shirt from the 80s that's like blown out. It has like a hole on half the sleeve, but he bought it anyway because he was like, I got to have this. I can never wash it, but I have to have it.
That's very cool. Good for Greg. Happy for Greg. Deep, what's your win this week?
Win is sort of related to Denver, but Colorado broadly is convicting Tina Peters.
Oh,
yeah.
So if you know about this, Tina Peters was the Mesa County clerk and recorder who committed some light, sort
Didn't
of
she assault a police officer?
Yeah, she did a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
So she was convicted on like.
I don't think the assault was any part of this particular trial. I think that was separate.
No, you're right.
Yeah, so she was convicted on some number of accounts. They involved like a conspiracy theory with the My Pillow guy.
Oh yeah,
she let people into like a protected data center and then went to a conference.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing, but like it's good to see that like these loons might be doing like their conspiracy theories elsewhere, but in Colorado we're not gonna put up with that.
Yeah, the system works sometimes.
It does. That was a nice little comeuppance to watch for sure.
These guys are weird.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the responsible for the elections, and she's going into the voting machines and pulling out code and sharing it with the My Pillow guy.
I'm just thinking about clerk
bizarre.
and recorder Paul Lopez, who we've had on the show many times, and like how seriously folks in that world take that job, and to have somebody in your field doing something that insane just feels like I couldn't even understand it. So I'm glad. Yeah.
Bree, take us home. What's your win this week?
Yeah, I think it's a win for the community. So Northsiders will know Gil Carpinelli. He's this community member who's been riding his bike around the neighborhood for 50 years. He's a gentleman who has autism. Lovely person, and he's always on this tricked out bicycle, and he's friends with everyone. I'm going to share a really beautiful story from 5280 magazine from like 15 years ago, just profiling him because this reporter saw him riding around and was like, I need to know who this guy is. Turns out everybody knows him. He's friends with the fire station. He's friends with the biker at the biker bar. And, but recently, a couple years ago, a bike shop helped him get an electric bike, and the frame, he rides it everywhere, and the frame cracked. And so there's a new GoFundMe from this gentleman, Eric Guterman, that runs E-Force electric bikes at 38th and Tennyson. He's been friends with Gil for 25 years. He met Gil when when Eric was the entertainment coordinator at the old Elitch's.
Oh, wow.
And Gil has been a season pass holder at Elitch's his whole life. And they became friends. And so he's always worked on Gil's bike, and he's helping him. And so he started this GoFundMe to help Gil get a brand new bike because his frame was cracked, and it's already at $7,000. They're hoping to raise around $9,000 so they can buy him a bike and then bank a little of that money because the bike shop just does repairs for him for free. But it was just like this really cool story of seeing how community members help each other out, but also the impacts that is like hard to measure. You can't measure the impact that Gil has on the community, but every person's story about him was just like, we love this guy. He just like is so much fun. We enjoy him.
That's great.
He has his own spot at the fire station. He has his own uniform. They like that he comes in and gets dressed and eats breakfast with them. And it just was like a cool thing because another component of this story is folks like Gil 50 years ago would be institutionalized because he has autism and he doesn't quote unquote function socially the way that other people think he should. And instead of that, the community has just become his family in this really cool way. And I think it's reciprocal, and it's really beautiful that he gives just as much as they give. And it's just a reminder that like talking to your neighbors is a cool thing to do. And I'm really glad that the community is rallying to get him a new bike because there's concern when you don't see him on the road for a couple of weeks. People are like, where's Gil? And it was just because his bike was broken. So I'll put a link to the GoFundMe too if you want to kick a little money Gil's way to help him get a new electric bike.
What an amazing story.
Oh, he's so cool.
We are absolutely going to share
great.
that GoFundMe.
That's good heartwarming.
Yeah,
story.
yeah, and heartwarming, but I think in a more empowering way because it is not just about a person with disabilities getting support. It's a person with disabilities who is also part of a community, and how he contributes is sometimes immeasurable.
Just makes an impact on people.
Yeah,
and
he goes to church. He sings every Sunday.
Good vibes.
Cool
Period.
guy.
Love it.
He's part of he's part of what makes the North Side the North Side. So, yeah,
such a good one. Wow, wow. And with that, we're done with the show. Deep, it was so great having you. We're going to have you back. This was really fun.
Thanks. Yeah. Maybe I'll do a little controversial bar bracket on Twitter. We can talk about that.
Oh, that would be great.
Let's do it.
That would be great.
Let's do it.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. Our producers this week were Francisco Kilgore, Selena C.A. Reynolds, Olivia Jewel Love, and me, Paul Caroli. Peyton Garcia and Adrian Gonzalez write our morning newsletter, Hey Denver. Bree Davies is our host. Our music is by Los Mocochetes, with additional mixing by Tyler Lindgren. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at CityCast Denver, and tell Gil Carpinelli about us the next time you see him. You can sign up for that daily newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. See you next week. All right, we're back.
Oh, you don't actually take a break?
No.
We can if you want.
Oh,
Need to?
no. For some reason in my head I've always imagined it.
No, I tried to crank this thing out because then they've got to spend a couple hours editing it.
They say never meet your heroes because you'll see their flaws. And now I realize you don't take breaks.
Here it is. Here's the room. This is how we do it. The curtain. Mask off.